CEO Wisdom Podcast, Neuroscience Edition with Ricky Patel. He is a PhD and founder, CEO at Point Science Analytics. We're going to talk about neuroscience. We're going to talk about AI, foundership, and everything in between. Ricky has an interesting background, to say the least. I'll let him himself introduce his own persona and background to you. So without further ado, Ricky, can you tell us about a bit more about yourself, what you're up to nowadays, and what led to this actual version of yourself?
Yeah, of course, mate. So thanks for having me, Charles. I did a PhD in clinical neuroscience, so molecular neuroscientist by training, and this is in motor neuron disease and dementia. So I looked at the molecular mechanisms involved in how these diseases occur in the broad spectrum of neurodegeneration. And the journey there wasn't easy. I mean, I'm not from a wealthy background, family status, the usual thing that people assume with those in higher education or deemed to be successful by society standards, right? I came from immigrant family. We were in the UK and suffered a lot of racial abuse, and this shaped my early childhood and my mind. And by the age of 9, along with the racial abuse, we had already moved to a different city, and then my father passed away. So these were large compounding factors in the early neurodevelopmental stages of a child's mind. And then it's like I went on this quest to just be and achieve with no understanding of how to process one's thoughts, feelings, emotions, no one there to teach me in the early 2000s. And as my mind developed, so too did my personality around this trauma. And I discovered very quickly that if I set goals and achieve them and work towards them, then I do not spend time thinking about the pain of the past or any of these traumas. And so I began setting goal after goal. I, as a youth, played cricket at quite a high level, did my undergraduate degree in biomedical science, climbed Mount Kilimanjaro, ended up doing a martial arts second degree black belt, master's degree, PhD. And it was one thing after another. But in the end, it was at the cost of my mind. And now I begin to unpackage childhood traumas, difficulties, and really understand myself in relation to my Buddhist faith, reading in philosophy, Stoicism, and speaking with a diverse crowd of individuals. I'm a firm believer that life has a natural course of progression to shift you onto your true purpose of being and greatest impact into the world, providing the greatest value and leaving your mark in a good way so others remember you. And a lot of this happened with me. The next stage was being a startup founder, as I am now, and venturing into secondary ventures as well, which I'm working on in the deep tech sense. But yeah, that's probably a detailed / overview.
Love it. Thanks for that. Why, as a high performer, am I thinking that you did not lose your mind, but actually fortified your mind with all these accomplishments? Were they a vanity accomplishment, or were you doing this for someone else? Because I'm probably making the parallels with myself nowadays. And anytime I accomplish an Ironman or a very tough feat, and I tend to achieve one quarterly every year, I somewhat get a small self-esteem boost, but I feel the change in me given it like a couple weeks after. It's like if I stepped up, and it's not really conscious. And well, it's conscious in the fact that I know it, and that's been my thesis when I started. So maybe it's self-fulfilling prophecy, but doing these things, for example, hustling in pain for 15 to 17 hours on one day, kind of changed your brain from a dopamine perspective. Just to tell your brain that, look, this will be over at some point, and the grit that it creates, a stoicism, which is that let's focus on the positiveness. It really forces your brain to go in the deepest corners of itself and find the positive in a total shit show, where you feel pain in your legs, where you're exhausted, where your brain creates all kinds of dark shit, you know. So in your case, I guess you didn't do that consciously. It was to prove to someone else. Can you shed some light on that?
Yeah, this is something that I've unpackaged over the last year and a half, and in particular, it starts at the racial abuse. So discovering as a child that my skin color is different, and in this world, different means bad. And as the same result, different skin color, different meaning bad, meanings you're unheard and you do not have a voice. And so that propelled me and was kind of the catalyst on an unconscious level for me to achieve. And in my way, this was the letters after my name, and my title changes to doctor. Oh, then I'll be heard. Then you will listen to me. And I thought that would lead to peace and happiness. And actually, it didn't. It's like having the fancy Rolex or the big Lamborghini car or anything like this. It's stuff. What it gave me actually was understanding and knowledge and expertise of how to learn, how to understand myself better. And I'm also a firm believer, like yourself, Charles, that great adversity and pressure makes us better. And I wrote a piece on my Sunday reflection newsletter of how pressure makes diamonds or coal. And it's either one or the other. Whereas if you can be the diamond, but be surrounded by those who are constantly negative, that undermine you, who have been formed into charcoal, and that residue rubs off on the diamond, which ends up it looks like charcoal in the end. So who you surround yourself is key and pivotal as well. And in this day and age, I strive for situations which are difficult. So physically, you mentioned the Ironman, so I'll go on weighted runs, or I'll do very intense workouts or bag work, hitting the punch bags. And I'll always remember this in moments when I'm feeling my worst. So just last week on the weekend, I was on the sofa, wasn't feeling great, mentally very fatigued, physically very fatigued. And it was in that moment, that's the game breaking moment for me, where I go, I can sit here and feel like this and do the classical version of rest, have a nap, relax, do the usual. Or I can fill the bath with cold water and jump in. So I filled the bath with cold water, jumped in, and then I went into the garden, did some gardening, like heavy labored work. So I was sweating, then got the kettlebell out, did a kettlebell workout for 15 minutes. And then I just stood there covered in sweat, but fulfilled that I'd pushed through. And it's that moment where you have a defining choice. Do you stay on the sofa because you're feeling horrendous? Or do you use that feeling of sorrow and pain and I need to rest to propel you further? In actual fact, it energized me. It gave me more mental energy for the day, and I felt amazing. So it was that kind of shift that I've realized over time. There's a great term that I came across a couple of months ago, and it's from the team at Founders Taboo, who work on founders' mental health for early stage startup founders and those in entrepreneurship. And it was post-traumatic growth. So individuals that go through tough or traumatizing situations, they often find that they end up growing a lot after that. And I really reflected on this. And so what happens is after the trauma occurs, we actually dip into a phase of sadness, mild depression, and sorrow. But as we start to climb back up to what was our baseline, we actually grow further than the baseline. So our baseline actually shifts higher now. And once this happens a couple of times after experiences of trauma or difficulties, we end up unconsciously, potentially pursuing difficult times because we know great growth comes out of it. And when I heard this and when I looked into it, I was like, oh my gosh, maybe all throughout my life, I've unconsciously just pursued difficulties because during my childhood, there were these difficulties present, which were out of my control. I had no choice about them. But down the line, I knew that with great struggle comes the great growth and learning, knowledge, and understanding. So that's kind of my take on it.
So many insights to uncover here. First one is, Well, we come from different background. Everything considered equal, I'm probably 2-3x more privileged than you are. Um, but I am still somewhat quite unsatisfied with some parts of my life, you know. For example, my binge drinking from 15 to 18. The world has interesting ways of equilibrating things, you know. It's not necessarily a blessing to be a trust fund baby, for example. I'm not a trust fund baby. I come from middle, higher class, had good parents, good education, good support, you know. They didn't restrain me and so forth. But the point I'm trying to get there is that I look at some parts of my life, and nowadays that I'm this Charizard version of my past Charmander, Pokemon analogies for all my fans out there. um I'm like, I'm gonna fix that, you know. I'm gonna fix this. In my case, I think just teaching entrepreneurship to younger folks. I don't think, you know, my self-destructive behaviors with alcohol, for example, have been all lost as well. I've learned social skills, just like my addiction to World of Warcraft wasn't so bad. I learned a bunch of skills there. But I do think that if we teach entrepreneurship to other younger folks, we can get them out of these situations quicker. And in your case, um, ironically, I think the poorest countries in the world are the most racists, and that's for one reason, is that it's lack of education, right? Um, Me, and I don't like to talk about that much a woo woo part of racism, you know, because I well, I mean, I would be for education and telling folks that if you're racist, you're just losing out. You know, you're losing out on talent. You're losing out on different thinking patterns and so forth. But my point is, if the younger Ricky, for example, wouldn't have got this bullying or this ceiling from society, and the Indian society is quite good at casting folks out, you know, and it's quite horrendous. I can try, and is the key word here, to put myself in your shoes and just be like, oh, my skin is actually a limiting factor, or my name, you know, is that fucking sucks, you know. And I think just India needs to learn as a whole that this is somewhat bullshit. And if, for example, I would come to you in my program and just give you the opportunities, so I'm doing that, but probably not enough to young folks, I think it could change your life. That's the first thing that went through my mind. And I'll let you reply to that. But the phases of life, right? I consider myself to be a late bloomer, and I'm still somewhat recovering from that quote unquote traumatic version of my life, which was the very alkalized version of it from 15 to 19, you know, binge drinking every weekend. That was somewhat very traumatic, and I'm glad that I got alive out of it. But I do see it as a growth curve as well. I do consider myself a late bloomer, because I think that life, when it comes to change, there's two things, right? There's psychology and there's real action. So I lost all this time, like drinking and not building stuff. And entrepreneurship, I think, is a great savior, quote unquote. Um, but there's also the psychology version of it. I wasn't aware of a bunch of things back in these days. I didn't even know what the life purpose was, you know, and most kids aren't, because society doesn't teach them that. Which is why, as a result, nowadays I'm growing slowly but surely. Um, and the last thing that you shared with, like, the lack of momentum, um, we all face that every now and then. And I wrote something that is a bit egotistical here, but it's kind of funny. The rain doesn't catch me, I catch the rain. When I go out on a run, you know, and I see that it's raining, it's on purpose, you know. I want to feel the rain. I want to be soaked. I want to be uncomfortable. It's not the rain catching me. It's me making the decision on purpose to get wet and uncomfortable. And when the brain is in these patterns, me, it was very, just this morning, you know, I had two Australian podcast calls. Before that one, I had to get at 5:30, and my brain didn't want to go, but you need to give it a reason to get up. You need to condition it to do these things, and your life will get better. Like me, I can definitely give that testimonial. The very last thing here, because you uncovered a lot, is the titles, the Lambos, and all of that. The Iron Man title didn't change me, you know. It's everything considered equal. It's a very egotistic thing, or the ultra title, it doesn't change your life. The Lambo won't change your life. The mansion won't change your life. The relationship won't change your life. What will change your life, in my humble opinion, is constant progress, 1% progress daily. The feeling of improvement, the feeling that you're improving on a daily basis, you're learning, you're growing from the brain, but also from the heart. And that, it's Tony Robbins, progress is happiness, or something like that. Very much true. What do you think about all of these weird and contrarian points that I put forward?
Yeah, so starting with the race side of things, that was actually because we were the only brown family on a white estate or surrounded. So it was the racial abuse suffered because we were different, basically. And going through life, as I speak about this, what actually happens is when that racial abuse is suffered, you grow up, or I grow up, should I say, thinking that it's normal and that it's okay to do. And so I become a contributor of it as well. And this is where we get into the realms of now what is being shown in society of unconscious bias, which is a bias present that we have, that we don't even know we exhibit or that we have. And that gets into grounds of difficulty because many people will reject certain things if they are told, oh, look, you have behaviors which are racist. No, I don't. Well, it's an unconscious bias, so you don't actually know you've got it. You just exhibit it on a regular basis. And then when we get into, because we touched on a number of points here, when we get into things like the Lambo and titles, I was a genuine believer that it would improve me having this PhD. It would make me better. It would move things forwards for me. In actual fact, it actually just, it opens doors, which is a great assister. So the letters after my name, if I send someone a cold message regarding something neuroscience related or something I'm working on, they are very, very likely to now accept and reply and want to get on a Zoom. The same way driving down the street in a Lamborghini, people turn their heads. That could be, I guess, to a degree, opening the door of possibility that someone engages in a conversation. So although it's not a life-changing thing, it's potential. I view it now as a potential door opener, my PhD, and moving forwards, which changes kind of like that vision on it, rather than I am defined by my PhD and I'm only meant to be staying in a lab doing lab-based experiments and that's it. It's actually no. If it's viewed as now the thing that opens multiple doors for me, then my progress and growth is going to be accelerated. And then that gets onto the point of growth, acceleration, and through the process. I'm a big believer in lifelong learning and early stage childhood, like you mentioned, that phase when you went through binge drinking. I was going through a stressful phase as well during my PhD where I seeked alcohol for dependence. And I was going through that as well. But I now know, reflecting back on all these years and decades and working through things, that actually I have a phrase that I say, all I know is all I know. And that's so true in the moment, because in that very moment, like before I came into this conversation with you, Charles, I knew a limited amount. There was only a certain amount I knew. And it's up to me whether I seek to gain more knowledge and understanding, learn more and expand more, or I just close the door. And I go, actually, no, I know my thing. I'm an expert in what I'm talking about. That's fine. It's my way or the highway. But in actual fact, the one thing you realize when finishing a PhD is you know so much about one thing, you know very little at all about anything else. And that goes back on the phrase that I use, all I know is all I know, and keeps me humble moving forwards, wanting to talk to different individuals, whether they're class, race, gender, anything and everything, how much they're earning, how little they're earning, how many degrees they have, how many degrees they don't have. Irrelevant, because everybody has a unique, their own USP of knowledge to share with me, for me to grow mine. Now, whether it be what I already know, in which case, great, it just cements that and it reaffirms that, I guess, to a degree. Or the majority of the time, if not most of the time, it's adding. So it's building bricks on my already large skyscraper building. So they're making it even bigger with knowledge. And I think that's great. I think that's beautiful. And this is the way that great growth occurs, with dialogue, networking, conversations such as this.
100%. The first point here that you addressed, and yeah, it's fucking sucks, man. Like when you're in an environment and people are limiting you. Again, it might look like first world problem, but I can somewhat relate. And I mean, we all do our best to relate with other folks with our background, right? I can't control my past. But I was, and I think like many teenagers or young adults seeking their independence, like you're stuck in an environment. So I'm just curious, like, how could we help solve that? First, I think the adulthood age is bullshit. I think people should be able to start their own stuff at 13. The other day I wrote like how to start your own lemonade business and make $200 a day. And I think my math made sense there for any youngsters. And imagine making $200 a day. I mean, that would be on weekend, right? I think on weekdays it would be much more quieter. But the idea looked like having your stand on a cycling road, where a lot of athletes run and do bike and do rollerblades. They're all exhausted with the sun. You take the hottest days and you have your little stand there. Anyway, so I'll be seeking ideas to change that, because I think the greatest motivators and the greatest factors in life is the fire that's in you, the passion, which might comes from, fuck man, I've lived that and I don't want others to live that, like me. Why did it took me like 4 years? I wasted all this time in the education, the classic education system. I didn't know about entrepreneurship. Why did folks try to force me down that education path, while I could start my own shit? And yeah, it's hard, entrepreneurship, but 100% worth it. And people need to know about it. And I do think that most of this society will become entrepreneurs with the venue of AGI, which is a topic we might want to get into. So that's the first thing. And then yes, like life, you need to be able to constantly adapt to what's in front of you. I mean, your title in itself, me, I know like how hard it is, a PhD. I don't 100% know, like, but I've dealt with various PhDs with my first nootropic business. I hired them, neuropharmacists, and get a lot of respect for them. PhD is long, is hard, it's focus, and it does have an impact in your life. But yet, like it won't like change it completely. Like mindset will, right? Like truly understanding stoicism will. Stoicism, guys, by the way, is the best philosophy for entrepreneurs, because entrepreneurship is very hard. You throw a whole bunch of challenges at yourself, and you need to be able to have a simple thing. Is it something I control? If not, you forget about it. Is it something that I control? What do I control? Okay, let me act on this. And the natural outcome is that you will get positive stuff happening in your life. But yeah, in your case, I mean, everything considered equal, Rick, I think you panned out pretty well, and I do see like a bright future ahead of you. And I am very much a believer in the judoka strategy of everything. Trauma can be toxic also. Like if you can't get out of the hole, like Batman. But once you get out of the hole, and these movie analogies are funny because they don't really exist, but still, they hold some truth to it. If you get out of the hole, you will thrive, And that was the logic in the last Batman's movie. He was stuck in a hole. He was trying to get out of it. And that's the key lesson, guys. You need to try. You need to put in action and be stoic about it. Yes, you will hurt yourself. You will try. You will fail. But once you get out, I think these are the strongest characters in our world. For example, Elon Musk, why is he there today? He got bullied quite heavily, and I still think that subconsciously, because I don't think he think of being bullied every day. I do think that's a strong motivator. I'm about to read his new biography, by the way, by Walter Isaacson. Should be quite fascinating. And yeah, everyone has traumas, but yeah, I think that he will get very far, and so will you. Maybe we can focus that last part of this convo as per what you do, Rick. Maybe we can have another round eventually, because there's so much to uncover here about the brain. But tell us about like what you do like professionally at Point Science Analytics, because that piqued my interest as well. And how you bring your and me, I told you last time, it's not the PhD necessarily, but it's you studying the brain and people that study the brain had a huge advantage in the social and the business world because they understand how the brain works. So tell us about what you do there.
Yeah, so I started point science analytics straight out of my PhD because I saw the gap, which was biotech companies are notoriously difficult for investors, VCs to understand in terms of the complex science. Scientists love big words and the complexity of the terminology they use. And simplifying this for them would make their life easier in the early stage process of investment. So early stage technical due diligence. And I started with bullet point reports. Then as I began to expand, wanting to create an AI platform for this, I was conducting open-ended interviews. And it would always end with, Ricky, do you consult or do you provide your time for getting on calls of reviewing some neuroscience-based pitch decks or neurotech-based? And this was now a service that I've launched and moved forward with purely because in this world of, I've noticed in investments, it's very rare that investment partners or large firms would have PhD level analysts on a specific subject. They are out there, they are present, I've seen them. However, a lot of the time it's individuals with a diverse background, they're previous ex-entrepreneurs, they're in the financial sector and transitioned away, either accountants or investment banking. And so to understand something like neuroscience on a neuroscience-based biotech company or in a neurotech company, and then pick holes in the technical specifics that are present. Okay, why are they doing it this way? What does their data say? What are the potential red flags? What could be future problems? What needs to be told to this company that come back with more data in X, Y, and Z for these reasons? It helps the investors de-risk their process. And if we can do that at a really early stage with input from expertise, such as a neuroscientist in that field, then the investment strategy becomes just a lot better in terms of the risk. We are quite literally providing an element of de-risking at an early stage by being devil's advocate, being on the call, asking the tough questions. And this not only helps the investor, but also helps the founder or the founding team who are present, because it provides them with a different method of thinking to say, okay, what have we missed? Because one neuroscientist will view it in one way, one may view it in a different way if they're critiquing something. So that's kind of the work that I'm doing. And it's to assist and provide value. Really, that's the best that I can do, to use my knowledge now to provide value for this community.
Quite inspiring. Something that I'd love to get into as well. I have this called email agency, and we started offering the helping startup raise capital as a service, but I'd love to go on the VC side as well and scout as a service and or do due deal as a service, because yeah, I love analyzing stuff and I'm not afraid to ask the questions. Very interesting, Rick. Yeah, I would definitely love to do a round two with you. I really appreciate you and your vibe, your energy. Like, I don't know, you know, sometimes you don't know, but I know that you come from a tough place, you know, that you lived it in your heart. And yeah, I've got lots of respect for that. And I view you kind of as a warrior that comes back from this adversity. And I do think you're going to make it big. And yeah, surrounding yourself with positive and folks that have been through that will definitely help you. And I think you're doing that also by showing up on this pod and so forth. So thanks for all of that. Where can people find out more about you?
So they can find out about me on LinkedIn. I'm very active on LinkedIn. I post about biotechs and neuroscience. My Sunday reflection newsletter on LinkedIn as well will go deep, very deep into my mindset, mental health, well-being, my journey, and I'm quite an open book. And then if people want to explore working with me, need a hand, feel free to reach out. My DMs are always open. I love talking with a diverse crowd. And if there's problems that need solving, I'm there. Absolutely.
Love it, dude.